everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on chapters 10 through 12 of Scum Villain Self-Saving System. And yeah, last week we played it really cool. Last week was just very nonchalant, no big deal. We just saved Liu's life. That's all. We just saved Liu Chingay's life, and we've altered the course of the entire novel as we know it. Which, granted, we have altered the course of the novel before saving his life many times over at this point. But I feel like with saving Liu, it starts to be like, oh, yeah, there's going to be repercussions happening because of the actions that Shin is taking. And that's really, really exciting. So I'm excited. We're about a third of the way through the story, maybe a little bit more than a fourth. So I'm pretty excited of the chapters we have to come. We're going to be looking at chapters 10, 11, and 12 today. In this book, pages 98 through 123. So not a big chunk or a big section, but I didn't know how to gauge these first couple weeks getting into the novel. I know last week wasn't as long as the first couple weeks, but then there was only 2 chapters in the second week, and it took us nearly 2 hours. And I was like, what? So I'm trying to get my groove with gauging how long each of these are going to take. And so even though we're doing 3 chapters this week, it still isn't very lengthy yet, but I'm looking down at my chapters that I've picked out for weeks to come. There's going to be some big chunks with some much denser material, I'm sure, that's going to make up for it. So we'll do what we can. But I also have some comments that I want to talk about. We're going to start out. I also have something to share from the weird world of the Scum Villain Feral fandom. I feel it's like the Scum Villains Self-Saving Systems Feral fandom. Tongue twister, say it 5 times fast. Scum Villain Self-Saving System Feral fandom. We're all members of it, and that's totally fine. So, we are starting out this next set of chapters with 495 B points, which is the most we've had so far. We started from the bottom, now we're here, in the words of Drake. And we started out with 15 B points at the beginning of the last set of chapters, and we've rose to our highest of heights so far. So, I'm going to be very interested as we keep track to see, where our B points end up, what's winning the lottery in terms of B points, what's getting you the most tickets to get the prize at the arcade in terms of B points, but we'll see. So Reiki has done a huge service, and in the Discord, it's pinned there. So if you're on the Discord on Patreon, you'll be able to see. But Reiki has basically spoiler tagged all of the titles for all of the chapters for me. So starting this week, I'll be able to go to Discord after we're done reading the chapters, and I'll be able to tell you all in real time each week what the chapter titles were, which is very handy and convenient. So thank you, Reiki, for going above and beyond to do that. I really appreciate it. But I didn't get to talk about the chapter titles for chapters 7, 8, and 9 last week, so we might as well talk about them now. Chapter 7 was called Screwing Over the Male Lead. Screwing Over the Male Lead, which was basically about Shin tricking the Skinner demon to attack Lo Binghe because he knew that Lo would be able to survive because he's the protagonist. And then chapter 8 was called Giving Rewards Afterwards, being like, it all paid off. Everything worked out. And then chapter 9 was the Bison Peak Lord, which was Liu Chingay. So far the chapter titles, I like chapter 7's title a lot, but the chapter titles are pretty on point. I like that. Couscous had some really good comments here, and they talked about how Lo Binghe has a love. I really liked this comment here. Has a love for the jade amulet that to him represents his mother's love. The thing about that amulet is it's fake. It's a counterfeit. It's not the real thing. And I really loved how Couscous pointed out, and I hadn't thought of it this way, but it's so cool how his love for the fake and counterfeit jade pendant and what it represents of his mother's love is kind of like his love for Shin Qingqiu. Shin Yan is portraying Shin Qingqiu and changing his character. So the love, the figure that Lo Binghe loves, which is Shin Qingqiu in the story, is a fake or counterfeit Shin Qingqiu. It's not the real one. It's the one that Shin Yan is embodying. And that's the one that he loves. And I love that despite it not being the real thing, the fact of the matter is that it has more value than the real one would. Like a real jade amulet would not have the same value to Lo Binghe as the counterfeit one does, because the counterfeit one represents his mother's love. Just as the real Shin Qingqiu would definitely not have the same value to Lo Binghe as Shen Yan's does. So I thought that was incredible. I was like, that was just, oh, that's so good. I'm glad you pointed that out. That's awesome to note. Also, I want to say this, please. I've had so many comments about pronunciation. So many, to the point where I just kind of like start ignoring them. I was like, please stop. I know that by the time that you all get to this, I probably will have said it in the comments quite extensively, but I understand that I am not probably saying some names correctly. My Western ass is not used to Mandarin, to Chinese nomenclature. It's not good. But also I've had a lot of people be like, quit shortening the names. Look, I'm sorry, but I am not saying Ning Ying Ying every 5 seconds. There was one page in the last set of chapters where her name was like in 5 times in one paragraph, and I'm like, I'm not doing it. So look, here's what's going to happen. If we do get like Liu, now that we know that Liu Qingge and Liu Mingyan are siblings or cousins or whatnot, knowing they're related, if we have 2 characters that have the same surname like Liu, then I will say their full name so that we don't have confusion. And I will try to say it in the actual reading itself, but it is just a tongue twister. I feel like this being MXTX's first work, I feel like part of what she's learned is that a lot of these names are just tongue twisters, especially the locations. And I feel like that's part of the joke, is the names are so convoluted and hard to say that that's part of the parody of the story in itself, because we don't see the same sort of thing in her other stories. So it feels like that's part of the joke. But I'm going to try, but I will tell you right now, in the discussions, I am not saying their full names. It will drive me nuts. So y'all will just have to deal when we get to the discussion portion. I'm not going to say the full name unless, like I say, there's multiple characters with the same surname. That's just going to have to be how it is. And in the actual readings, I will try my best. And also, I do understand that I may say a name wrong. Here's the thing. Y'all can tell me to the ends of the earth how to pronounce it, but it'll have to come to me in my own time. That's just how my brain works. Someone did suggest, I think it was Holy Milk, to go to the translation guide in the back. I'll probably do that, but I'm probably going to get it wrong. So y'all are just going to have to bear with me. Be patient, bear with me, forgive me, or stop listening, because that's just how it'll have to be. But I've gotten so many comments, it's almost gotten a little annoying, and I'm just like, please stop. I know you're trying to be helpful, but when there's like 40 comments, it just makes me want to just shut the laptop and go, no. My Taurus brain goes, I don't want to do it then. So just forewarning, just be patient with me. I know I am self-aware. Y'all just gonna have to deal, and just put your fist in your mouth and be like, okay, Romania, but I will try, but I make no promises. Chibi Reiko notes that Shin Yan read the novel in 20 days. And I thought about that because we were talking with some people in the comments about, you get really into a story and you read it like really quickly. Like there was an Ace of the Diamond fan fiction called Crossfire, and I became obsessed with it. It's like 1,000,000 words, and I read it in a weekend. I read it like over the course of it was an extended weekend, so like in 5 days I read the whole thing, and I was just like obsessed over it. I did nothing that weekend. I got behind in reactions because I was reading that story and I couldn't stop. But the thing about it is, oftentimes when you binge read, something that can end up happening is that you skip over details or you miss things. That's why I'm only doing like 20 to 30 pages a week, because I know that I want to focus on those 20 to 30 pages and then go from there. So there's a very good chance that things will get missed. So I'm curious to know, since Shin Yan read this novel in 20 days, it's supposed to be millions and millions of chapters, if there's a possibility that there's aspects of the story that Shin skipped over or that he kind of ran through and that was just it. So if there are parts of the story he forgot about, and then he's like, oh yeah, this happened. And so that's going to be interesting to see if it plays out in the actual novel. That's going to be a lot of fun. Robin Hood Productions pointed out that Shin, in talking in chapter 4 about the concubine behavior, was actually referring to the OG Shin Ching-cho, and noted that the original Shin Ching-cho was bitter, paranoid, ungrateful, and petty, and was trapped by his riches. And despite the kind of upper middle class, growing up and kind of privileged life that Shin Yan seemed to have had, he's very different than the OG Shin Ching-cho. So I thought that was a good clarification, so thank you for that. And finally, APNO4WW points out that Shin from the book, and I thought this was really interesting because in the Donghua, Shin is not only oblivious, but he's just completely all the time like, oh, Lo, can't trust him. What's he thinking? And I was like, it's clear that Lo Binghe has puppy eyes for you. But AP pointed out that in the book, Shin makes a note that Lo Binghe smiles, but it's a front for him actually scheming and thinking up negative thoughts. So it makes sense now in the book that when Shin looks at Lo and Lo's like staring back and smiling at him, he thinks that he's like plotting against him. And I'm like, oh no. So it's this concept that Shin doesn't realize how the story is changing, and what he thinks Lo is thinking is so far from the truth. And I'm like, oh, okay. I thought that was really interesting, right? I thought that was pretty cool. So those comments were great. I absolutely love them. I'm super excited. But also I wanted to share this one thing. Again, the Feral fandom on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. I feel like whenever you can't get merchandise for a series that you like, you just create whatever you can find. So when this was shared, and it's like, it's so stupid. It's Shin Ching-cho that they made a fold out. They made it into a car, and the caption, "He'll save me." That's so freaking funny. It's so stupid. I'm just like, wow, this is what the fandom has to resort to because they don't have anything else. I'm looking forward to the Feral fandom inserts that we get throughout. Week 2, if it was any indication of how feral this fandom can get, I'm very, very excited to see what all we get with the fandom to come. So, very excited indeed. So, yeah. I just wanted to share that because it was hilarious. But yeah, so I'm super excited to see what we get. My dogs are at my feet. They'll probably be annoying, but y'all know how that song and dance goes. They're not quite as annoying as saying ning ying ying. But what can we do? So I'm super excited, y'all. I can't wait to see what we get in this chapter set, but we're not going to waste any more time. We are going to start Scum Villain's Self-Saving System, chapters 10 through 12, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. So when we last left off, Liu Qingge was very repulsed by the fact that he was saved. Chapter 10. Even though the person he'd worked so hard to save was disgusted with him, Shin Ching-cho was incomparably satisfied. Liu Qingge should have died by his hand, but Shin Ching-cho had saved the man through a series of freak coincidences. If he could befriend Liu Qingge, even if his plan to raise Lo Binghe into a top 10 best disciple didn't succeed, as the master of Baizan Peak, Liu Qingge could at least stand beside him as a fellow sex sibling and help him shield him a little. That's going to be so interesting. We'll talk about that when we get to the discussion. Although this was a little utilitarian, as his own sorry life was on the line, it was no time for moral dilemmas. There was no sense of time within the caves. Shin Ching-cho felt like he hadn't done anything at all when the day to end his seclusion arrived. Shin Ching-cho sat cross-legged on a stone platform, eyes shut. He kept them closed until the last wisp of spiritual energy had finished circulating through all his limbs and bones. Having intensively cultivated for several months, he could freely control his spiritual energy and had risen one level above his original cultivation base. This told him that he had obtained 100% command over his body, and even the last shreds of discoordination had been annihilated. Both his eyes shone brightly, and his immortal figure now felt distinctly different from how it had been. Shin jumped up and down from the stone platform, his body all the more graceful, as if his four limbs had been instilled with a breeze and filled with vigor. Of course, it was possible that this was only his subjective feeling. After all, the days in seclusion had passed so quickly, as if he jumped ahead in the video progress bar. If this were a novel, and not one padded out like that of Great Master Airplanes, the plot would have finished in one chapter. Before leaving, he thought he ought to greet his neighbor, so he knocked on the stone wall. "Oh, Shidi, how is your situation over there?" he asked. "Xizang will be leaving first." His voice echoed in the empty cavern. While not loud, it could be clearly heard by a cultivator like Liu Qingge. As expected, he received no response. Shin Qingzhou didn't mind. It was enough to express his kind wishes. With a sweep of his hymn, he exited the cave like the wind whispered beneath his feet, ready to welcome the approaching storm. If he had correctly calculated the time and date, it was about time for an upcoming story event of critical importance. It could have been considered the first small climax of the early narrative. Oh, well, we're about getting a third of the way through this first volume, the early narrative. The demons would arrive, armed and eager to provoke a fight, thereby triggering mass panic. The small climax also included a brief glimpse of two of the book's important female leads, whereupon they'd start paying attention to Lo Binghe. The Lingqi caves were isolated from the outside world, and the interior of the caves was tranquil. But as soon as Shin Qingzhou exited them, he found the entirety of Zhongding Peak consumed by the fire and smoke of war. Panicked disciples ran every which way, and the alarm bells rang in united clamor. Shin Qingzhou instantly understood. They'd already appeared. Perfect timing. He'd arrived just at the right moment. As soon as they saw him, several disciples from some peak or another threw themselves at him. "Oh, Shin Shibo, you finally left seclusion!" "It's a disaster! Monsters from the demon realm sneaked into Chongding Peak and injured many of our sex siblings." Shin Qingzhou patted a disciple with each hand. "Oh, settle down. Where is Zhongmin Zhang?" "Zhongmin Shibo left the mountain on important business," Disciple A said tearfully. "Otherwise, how else would those monstrous demons have used this chance to invade?" "Those monstrous demons are truly despicable," Disciple B said furiously. I love they're just A and B, Not only did they take advantage of our vulnerability to invade, they also severed the rainbow bridges connecting the 12 peaks. Rainbow bridges connecting, I know it gives off like Thor Ragnarok vibes, but also BL to the max, right? And set up some strange barriers. Now Chongding Peak is completely unable to receive support from the other peaks. Shin Qingzhou knew all of this. He was just asking while passing through. As of now, he had gone through cultivation training, and on top of that experience punching Lo Binghe and kicking Liu Qingge, with a bearing of heroic resolve that reached the heavens. He said, "No need to panic. Our Kang Zhang mountain is a majestic, unparalleled sect that has produced countless heroes. We would never fear the dregs of the demon realm." The disciples instantly felt like they'd found a pillar of support, and they followed behind Shin Qingzhou like a train. Along the way, the disciples who'd been flailing around like headless chickens also rushed to follow, and the ones who didn't know what was happening followed as well. In the end, the procession kept growing longer and longer until they arrived before Chongding's Peak's main hall. It's like a little thing, like little ducks following along the way. Every single member of Kangzhong Mountain sects on Zhongding Peak had come to encircle and exterminate the demons who had overtaken it deep within. Due to plot requirements, the disciples of Qingjing Peak were all coincidentally at Zhongding Peak to greet Shin Qingzhou as he left seclusion, and they had been gathered there for a while now. I like that Shin's calling out like the plot convenience of it. Shin Qingzhou first sought out Lo Binghe's figure, and indeed he saw him standing within the group, expression solemn. Oh, so this is a little bit different than the Donghua a bit. It had been some time since he'd last seen the boy. He'd grown taller by a fair amount, his youthful figure like a graceful, elongating stalk of bamboo. Along with that handsome little face, he drew a great deal of attention. Having confirmed that the protagonist was at the scene, Shin Qingzhou's heart settled, and he turned his focus to the enemy. Oh wow! So we don't get that whole scene in the Donghua where he like sees him again for the first time after he gets out of the peak. He's like, "Oh hey!" We don't get that scene. Donghua, you were pushing the agenda, my friends. Before the elegant, magnificent Zhongding Hall stood more than 100 unknown individuals, roiling with demonic qi. The leader of this invasion was, in fact, a young girl who appeared to be no more than 15 or 16. Okay, so it's good to get her age, that she's about the same age as Lo. Shin Qingqiu's heart thumped with excitement. She's appeared! She's finally appeared! Demons loved exotic and unusual dress, but even among them, this girl's fashion sense was exceptionally unorthodox. Her jet black head of hair had been combed into many small braids. Her complexion was fair, her eye makeup bold, and her lips abnormally scarlet. Although she was young, it was self-evident that she would grow into a woman of overwhelmingly glamorous bearing. Wow, so it's interesting thinking that she'll grow up alongside them, or at least alongside Lo. Interesting. As it was a hot day, she was dressed lightly, having essentially only wrapped herself in several bolts of gauzy red cloth. Her wrists and ankles were decorated with silver bangles, the tiny bells on every limb jingling with her slightest movements. Oh, we'll talk about this. Her bare snow-white feet directly touched the ground. Shin Qingqiu couldn't help but side-eyeing them a couple times. His thoughts weren't indecent, but rather, you've traveled thousands of miles from the demon realm, crossing land and sea, and after arriving, you even climbed this tall mountain barefoot? Young miss, do your feet really not hurt? Oh, wait, that wasn't the point! I'm like, okay, so signs that Shin Qingqiu is gay. Number 173. When this beautiful, scantily clad woman shows up, his first thoughts are, girl, where's your proper footwear? Yes. The point was that this was one of the most popular female leads in the novel Proud Immortal Demon Way, Demon Saintess, Xia Hualing. Xia Hualing was a pure-blooded demon, vicious and merciless, crafty and proud, yet she was madly in love with Lo Binghe. After getting involved with Lo Binghe, not only did she kill for him, she even dared to commit an offense as monstrously treasonous as betraying the demon race. Though these days, a good number of people often denounce this trope of a brainless, lovesick girl, there was nothing you could do. An even larger number of male readers loved it. A pity that a girl this spicy could only be enjoyed by the male lead. Shin Qingqiu couldn't help but glancing at Lo Binghe. At the same time, Lo Binghe inadvertently swept his gaze about as well. Their two gazes met, and they both startled. Lo Binghe seemed about to speak, but he said nothing. Shin Qingqiu nodded at him. They're both like, are you not into her either? Oh, me either? Oh, what? The rainbow bridges had been severed. Of the various peak lords, the ones sleeping still slept. The ones in seclusion remained in seclusion, and the ones strolling kept strolling, and the ones away on official business did not return. The arrival of Shin Qingqiu, a member of the older generation, was as such powerfully reassuring the disciples regained confidence. Ming Fan was the first to yell, "Oh, demoness, my master is here! Let's see if you'll dare be so arrogant now!" More and more people joined the gathered crowd. Several hundred disciples in uniformly colored robes and furious expressions surrounded the invaders, trapping them in the space before the hall. Several demons tried to use the chance to break through, perfectly timing targets for Shin Qingqiu. He casually grabbed them, lifted them up, and threw them back to land at Xia Hualing's feet. Xia Hualing had always been clever and resourceful. Her earlier arrogance had derived from the fact that, having long enjoyed being the number one sect, Kangzhong Mountain's defenses were lax and loose. Lax and loose. Not at all like Shin. What are we talking about? She had also seen Yu Qingyan depart on official business and trying to clear up that dare drug ring, let me tell you, leaving Chongding Peak without one of its senior members to guard it. Sensing that things had taken a turn, she changed her tune. My people didn't climb this mountain for the sake of battle. It's just that we've long heard that Kangzhong Mountain produces many talented individuals, so we were curious. We wanted to ascend the mountain for a look, as well as to spar and learn from you. How kind of you. Shin Qingqiu flapped his fan. I just like the ka-chow. But if you've come to spar, why do you do so when the sect leader is away? Why sever the rainbow bridges? And why injure so many of our sex disciples? I've never seen this method of sparring. Sha Hualing bit her lip, utilizing that weapon exclusive to young girls. She twirled a stray lock of hair dangling beside her cheek around her finger. Oh, this must be the renowned Zhu Ya sword, Senior Shin Qingqiu, she said, drawling out each word. As expected, hearsay can't compare to seeing the real person. Ling Er is young and unable to manage her subordinates. If we have offended you or caused misunderstandings, we beg the immortal master to be magnanimous and forgiving. No matter how softly she spoke, Shin Qingqiu wouldn't be moved the slightest bit. Well, there's a reason for that. There's a reason he wouldn't be moved the slightest bit. He's gay. The truth of the situation was clearer to him than to anyone else. And his sexuality is clearer to everyone else except him. To lay it out plain, this trouble had begun when Sha Hualing was granted the title of a demon saintress, which had just happened. Being proud and arrogant, she had an exaggerated opinion of her own abilities. She had intended to slaughter the entirety of Kangzhong Mountain's peak in one go, then seize the nameplate hanging over Zhongding Hall as a war trophy and bring it back as proof of her achievement. At the same time, her exploit would be a demonstration of force directed at the human realm. Then what is the young Mrs. conclusion now? Said Shin Qingqiu. Why does he sound like Doctor Who? Sha Hualing pursed her lips in a smile. Though right now my people are at a disadvantage, that's only because your sect has such great numbers. Ling Er is unable to ascertain who between us would be the victor. Oh? Then what would you need to do so? Shin Qingqiu asked, putting on the air of an elder as smoothly as a fish took to water. Parting her red lips, Sha Hualing elegantly suggested a method that seemed fair and just. Why don't we each choose 3 representatives and hold 3 matches? Oh, we're getting that! Yeah! This suggestion was solid. For many years, the human and demon realms had maintained an uneasy balance and had yet to drop the pretense of peace. Eliminating Sha Hualing and her mob wouldn't be impossible, but would likely light a fuse. The demons definitely wouldn't let her death go unanswered, and it wouldn't be worth it if they stirred up an even greater conflict. On the other hand, simply letting them go would also generate trouble, if they couldn't allow outsiders to come and go as they pleased from Xizhongding Peak. By setting conditions and holding some matches, each teaching the other party a lesson or two, both parties could come back down and save face. It would be the best way to handle this. Since this was the first small climax in the original work, Shin Qingqiu still remembered it fairly clearly. Okay, yeah, like we were talking about, the fact that he read it so fast, he may have forgotten some details, but he remembers this part. Yeah. The first match was Shin... Oh, okay, we're going to get the 2 of them facing one another. Okay. The first match was Shin Qingqiu versus the demon elder Single-Arm Dubai. To highlight Shin Qingqiu's scummy nature, he of course used despicable and underhanded means to achieve victory. By comparison, Lo Binghe's honorable and upright actions in the third match illustrated a strong contrast for the readers. Now, however, Shin Qingqiu was not about to so pointlessly tarnish his image. Elder Single's arm's entire body was a dark purple color, and he was taciturn and reticent. At Sha Hualing's command, he walked toward a stretch of open ground. Okay, so it doesn't tell us yet who was the second match originally. The sex disciples cheered and shouted for their Shin Shibo. Shin Qingqiu knew the extent of this elder Single's arm strength. You only have 1 arm, he said, smiling. Even if I defeat you like this, it'd be due to an unfair advantage. Oh, Sha Hualing said from behind her hand. Actually, Ling Er has a solution. How about you also cut off one of your own arms? That way there won't be an unfair advantage anymore. Angry protests rose all around them. Unconcerned, Shin Qingqiu smiled slightly and slowly spread his fan. How about this? I won't use a single hand. Okay, all right. Chapter 11. These words threw the crowd into an uproar. Among them, Lo Binghe also stood shocked. Wouldn't use a single hand. Xia Hualing snorted, thinking Shin Qingqiu was being full of himself. But she was also secretly filled with endless glee. If her side could win a match so easily, why wouldn't they go for it? Since Senior Shin is so ready, let us start, she said hurriedly. A number of bystanders realized then that this girl was actually quite brazen. Though her manner was pure and innocent, her words were vicious and sinister, and she rushed to take advantage of others. As a reader enjoying the drama, Shin Qingqiu had come away with one impression. But experiencing the situation for himself, he came away with another. He'd never really been charmed by Xia Hualing's way of dealing with things, among other things. But between her youth and her daintiness, he had at least been able to force himself to regard her behavior as cute lolly willfulness. Until now. I like how he has to force himself, being like, she's cute for a girl, I guess. Under all those gazes, Shin Qingqiu stayed true to his words and didn't draw a sword. Instead, he played with the fan in his hand, smiling at Elder Single Arm. Elder Single Arm only had the one arm, but that didn't even slightly hinder his ability to swing his beheading saber. But his savage swing didn't actually hit its target. He whipped around to find Shin Qingqiu was already standing behind him, still smiling. In truth, Shin Qingqiu's face was getting sore. However, Zhu Ya had already left its sheath. Shin Qingqiu hadn't directly touched his sword at all. His left hand had subtly formed a sword seal, commanding Zhu Ya to fly and turn over, brandishing itself. Elder Single Arm's eyes were struck with pain from the flashes of the sword's snow-white gleam. He rushed to lift his saber and attack again. Saber and sword clashed in a succession of incessant ringing clangs while the sparks sprayed and danced. Incessant ringing clangs while the sparks sprayed and danced is my new tongue twister. The crowd was unable to tear their eyes away. In reality, this was just a competition, but anyone would have called it both captivating and captivating. The first captivating encompassed the impressiveness of the fight, where the use of real weapons made it a matter of life and death, but what made it captivating were the magnificent visual effects, especially Shin Qingqiu, who moved with such skill and ease in his pure and scholarly way, surrounded by the glint and flash of blades. On top of this, he continued to gracefully and leisurely fan himself with his paper fan. It was as if any instant he would compose a poem with several steps, like a figure of legend. According to legend, the emperor demanded the poet Shao Ji to compose a poem within 7 steps to prove he was innocent of treason. Describes the extraordinary literary talent. Gotcha. Such utterly breathtaking style. No achieving this style of badass was far too perfect. And I was like, they're going to go back to Lo as soon as he does this. As Lo Binghe watched, his heart practically galloped and his soul trembled. He'd known Shin Qingqiu was incredible, but he'd never anticipated that he was this incredible. So strong. Ah! Oh, goodness! Surrounded by the cheers of the sex disciples, Shin Qingqiu attained a complete victory in the first match. All right! Yes, please! At this moment, Shin Qingqiu realized why the original flavor had clung to being a poser like it was his lifeline. It was unbelievably satisfying. The disciples' gazes formed a sea of sparkling stars. What an inspiring experience. Shin Qingqiu was certain now. A scum villain could also gain reputation points. At the same time, the system also gave him good news. Demonic Invasion of the Immortals Mountain. First match of the competition. Shin Qingqiu's victory. Martial skill rating, plus 50 B points. Plus 50. Shin Qingqiu's pleased smile didn't last long. The system's next notification came like a slap to the face. System alert. If Lo Binghe does not participate in the competition, 1,000 points will be deducted from the protagonist's satisfaction points. What? Completely unprepared, Shin Qingqiu turned pale with shock. He'd been laboring to earn satisfaction points, huffing and puffing like an old ox dragging a broken cart, and only managed to earn somewhere in the 300s. And in an instant, he risked losing 1,000? System, are you trying to get people killed? Bitch, are you for real? This competition was an important part of the plot. At the same time, It also served as a small, early-stage climax that debuted two female leads and pitted their splendor against one another, and the consequences of it later enabled the protagonist to get an underling, and also allowed him to earn and learn secret techniques. All important things. If Lo Binghe didn't make it on stage this time, he would miss the limelight and be unable to grab everyone's attention, hence negative 1,000 satisfaction points. But if Shin Qingshou named him a sect representative and sent him out to fight, what would he be doing? The original Flavor, which I still love that he calls him that, pushed Lo Binghe to the battlefield because he was shameless. He didn't care about the sect's reputation. He hated Lo Binghe to the bone, enough to want to vicariously torture him via the hands of demons. The current Shin Qingshou didn't have any of these three motives. And at the end of everything, why was someone else responsible for the oh-so-mighty protagonist's satisfaction points? Shin Qingshou was still angrily rebuking the system for its unscientific approach when the time came for the start of the second match. Xia Hualing had been afraid that Shin Qingshou would fight all three matches himself, and swiftly said, if the same representative competes in all three matches, we would lose the chance to truly learn from each other. I will be my people's representative for the second match. No doubt Xia Hualing had entered first because she believed in her own strength. But she also likely thought that Shin Qingshou wouldn't use his senior position to bully a girl who was his junior. Shin Qingshou didn't want to concern himself with her thoughts at all and demonstrated as much. Even if he'd originally had the ambition to fight all three matches to earn the martial ability points and reputation, the system's notification had extinguished those hopes. However, the second match did have an impressive, attention-worthy highlight. You've all heard her, says Shin Qingshou. Who is willing to bear this heavy duty? Even though he was asking all the disciples of the sect, his gaze fell on a certain pocket of the crowd. Within that pocket stood a collection of graceful female disciples. Without a doubt, they belonged to Xianzhu Peak. In this group of pretty girls, each fairer, more beautiful, and more refined than the last, one stood out, a veil draped over her face. Immediately after Shin Qingshou asked this question, she slowly stepped forward from the crowd. Despite himself, a burst of excitement fluttered in Shin Qingshou. It's here! It's almost here! The two biggest female leads in the book, their first 1v1! What a dork! What an otaku! Liu Mingyan was a great beauty. A earth and heaven shattering great beauty, at the sight of whom both gods and ghosts would weep. Even though she belonged to Xianzhu Peak, which had produced generations of beautiful women since ancient times, she was still a crane among chickens. A crane among chickens, rising above and beyond them all. Oh my god. Her older brother, yes, was Baizan Peak's master, but because she was younger, she'd entered the sect later and become a disciple of Xianzhu Peak's next generation. Because her face was excessively beautiful, capable of stealing souls, she had to hide it behind a veil all year round, rendering her like unto a flower on a high cliff, unattainable and out of reach. I wonder if that stealing souls ability would be literal and come in handy later. We'll see. In brief, for the purpose of describing this character's appearance, Master Airplane Shooting Towards the Sky had probably used every single flattering vocabulary word and idiom he'd learned from elementary through high school. He must have had it hard. Shin Qingshou was very fond of this female lead, and it wasn't only because Liu Mingyan's beauty points were the highest. It was also because she had great poise. Again, Shin's like, oh, it's not just she's a pretty face, the poise, the charisma, uniqueness, nerve, and talent. She always understood the big picture and grasped the general situation, and her conduct was fair and honest. Even in Lo Binghe's gigantic harem, a wife with both intelligence and moral character was rare. Oh, we're going to talk about this. There was one more appeal factor. Liu Mingyan was the only female character for whom Airplane Shooting Towards the Sky didn't write detailed sex scenes. Oh, we're going to get into this. Oh, well, no wonder Shin likes her. Many readers have been highly dissatisfied with this arrangement, to the point where they spam the comments with their ranting. But this had given Liu Mingyan something no other female lead had, an image as clear as ice and pure as jade. Can't be helped. The unobtainable ones are always the best. This is what made the second match worth watching. An evil demoness naturally demanded a righteous saintess as a rival. Every man dreamed of being caught between an angel and a devil, to watch them jealously vie with one another over him one moment, then risk life and limb for his sake in the next. That was the highest, most sacred, perverted fantasy of every male organism. Of every male organism. He could get drunk off the wild, untamed charm of the wicked seductress, and at the same time his heart would ache for the austere taste of the pure saintress, who kept pulling him closer only to push him away. One had to admit Great Master Airplane was genuinely good at nailing what people found satisfying. Shin Chingcho couldn't help but giving Lo Binghe another glance. Lo Binghe found it very hard not to care about that gaze. Why exactly did Shin Chingcho keep looking at him? Was it possible that Shizune really had an interest in him? Oh my god! Oh, Shin! Shin, why are you looking at Lo, expecting him to love these two women? Why? For all of this talk of these two women being like every male's fantasy, you keep looking over at Lo, and Lo's like, does he like me? Is that why he's looking over at me? Oh my god. What a pity. Under Great Master, Airplane shooting towards the skies, pin. Battles between female characters usually lacked any standout moments, other than ripping for the male gaze. Is it like getting nude for that? What is that beep supposed to be for? I probably don't want to know. No, actually, if Shin Chingcho thought about it, as written by the Great Master, none of the battles had any memorable moments. It was always the same tired phrases like light like a lightning flash, colorful as a rainbow, sword glares of every color, horrifying as a monster, etc. Several instance times later, Liu Mingyan lost. They don't even show us! They don't even show us the battle in this! No! After all, at this time she hadn't yet gone to Wanjian Peak to claim her personal sword. Even though she did her utmost, her weapon was only a slender, ordinary blade, while Sha Hualing was already a demon saintess, with saintly weapons in ready supply at her beck and call. Naturally, there was a gap between their abilities. Oh my god! We're going to talk about this in the discussion, but that whole point about the battle and everything, oh my god, hilarious. What? Liu Mingyan approached Shin Chingcho. This disciple is lost. For failing the mission, I request Shin Shibo's punishment. When no one else would come forward, you assumed responsibility, said Shin Chingcho. This fight would never have been easy. Whether you attained victory or suffered defeat, both were acceptable outcomes. You need not be concerned. You need only take back the victory in the future. Having taken the second round, Sha Hualing's face was glowing, and she laughed delicately. Oh, this match will decide the overall victor. I wonder who Senior Shin will send out. This time, you must choose carefully. Shin Chingcho stood with his hands clasped behind his back. The young miss need not worry, he said with a profound air. This one has long since decided on a representative and can guarantee that, no matter if he wins or loses, he will become your life's bane. Sha Hualing took these words as merely his attempt at intimidation. She clapped her hands. Which brave warrior will take the third match? From the crowd of demons, a giant elder slowly walked out. He was giant because he really was unfairly tall. Definitely more than 3 meters, wouldn't you say? Built like a bear. Oh god, we're going to get into the bear versus man situation now. Built like a bear, he had a head of a disheveled hair and armor that covered him from head to toe with spikes. He dragged an giant iron hammer behind him. Shin Chingcho was positive that the ground quaked lightly with every step that he took. First, to give you all a warning. Oh, wow, so we're going to just give the warning now. The spikes on Elder Skyhammer, Tianchui's armor was coated with a highly toxic poison, Sha Hualing said gleefully. This poison is ineffective against demons, but if it enters a human body, there is no cure. The first thought Shin Chingcho had was, shit, Great Master Airplane shooting toward the sky. Don't just name things, whatever, without thinking. Calling the one with only one arm Elder Single Arm Dubai, then calling the one whose weapon was a giant hammer Elder Sky Hammer Tianshui. Are you afraid of naming things properly? Meanwhile, Xia Hualing's words had triggered a wave of rage in the onlookers. Piece of shit, demoness! If you want to compete, then compete! How can you say it's fair to use poison? I didn't conceal the information, did I? Xia Hualing retorted. If you think it's unfair, or are afraid of you losing your life, then forfeit the match and admit defeat. Then you won't need to compete anymore. We demons won't mock you. It's human nature to value your lives. But my people value glory over everything else. Between the demons' roaring laughter and the disciples' cries of condemnation, Shin Qingqiu rubbed the crease between his brows silently and silently sighed. Oh my God, we've got brow furrows! We've got brow creasing! It's an MXTX story for sure! From the reader's perspective, where you could live in the fantasy of being the protagonist, of course you'd love a woman like Xia Hualing and find her satisfying. But once you were a person facing off with her in reality, he couldn't believe anyone could bring themselves to like her. It wasn't that she was different from how she had been described in the story. In fact, the problem was she was exactly as advertised. Cruel and vicious, combined with an infatuation that made her throw her brain away. If you weren't the protagonist, you'd better run the hell away. The moment you threatened her or Lo Binghe's interests, even the tiniest bit, she'd want your life. She wouldn't even think of alternatives like chopping off your hands or feet or gouging out your eyes. Even if you were her father, you had to be careful. In the original work, to help Lo Binghe gain a standing in the demon realm, she backstabbed the guy. Shin Qingqiu remained unflappable in the face of Xia Hualing's provocations. Of course, because we all know why. He maintained his silence for a stretch, using the time to stare intently at the crowd of demons. Only at the end did he turn, fixing his gaze in a certain person's direction. Lo Binghe, come here. One more chapter! Yeah! Good. Chapter 12. Qingjing Peak's disciples fell into an uproar. The disciples from the other branches were calmer, as they weren't familiar with Qi Jing Peak's internal politics. They even thought that Shin Qingqiu had certainly selected a disciple that he was proud of, an unparalleled talent. That was the only way that they could hope to best this demon elder who appeared to be in his hundreds. It was strange that they'd never heard of this person, and he did seem rather young. Was it possible that Qi Jing Peak's disciples weren't yet aware of Lo Binghe's true abilities? Mingfan's face had gone white. Shizun, he stammered. To send this little to send Lo Shide, isn't it unbefitting? Oh, said Shin Qingqiu. Then will you go? Mingfan repeatedly shook his head. Even though he didn't want to offer himself, he would be happy to see Lo Binghe beaten to a pulp. This matter concerned the sect's honor. To let themselves be invaded and a Peak's nameplate taken, and to set themselves up to lose this competition? Kangjiang Mountain would lose face, and Qi Jing Peak would lose a massive amount of face. Ning Yingying was even more anxious, to the point that she teared up. She defiantly grabbed Lo Binghe's arm while stomping and yelling, No! Lo Binghe had no real battle experience. And if he had to face a demon elder covered from head to toe with spikes and poison, carrying a hammer that weighed at least several hundred kilograms, he definitely would be beaten to death. You lot think I want him to enter? I was forced into this. I have no choice. Even so, Shin Qingqiu stated, I said he'll be our representative. So he will. Are you unsatisfied with this master's decision? Ying Ying let go of him. Ning Ying Ying saw the stony look on her master's face and knew there was nothing she could do. Lo Binghe patted her soothingly. Oh, don't worry, Shiji. He spoke in a steady voice, even though his face was stark white. I may be untalented, but if Shizun has chosen me, I will spare no effort. Even if I must stake my life, I won't lose face for the sect. Ning Ying Ying rubbed away her tears and let go of Lo Binghe's arm. As if she couldn't stand to stay there and watch her crush take a beating, she stomped her feet several times and ran off whimpering. Shin Qingqiu was overjoyed. Good! Run! If she ran, then the trouble she was supposed to make after this drama wouldn't crop up. Oh, okay. The The crowd saw that although the youth who approached was upright and honorable in body and spirit with good potential and foundation, he was clearly a young disciple with shallow cultivation. In contrast, the demon representative, Elder Skyhammer, loomed with his bear-like build. Compared to Lo Binghe's still developing figure, he radiated an oppressive aura, his entire body emitting dark, roiling demonic chi. Everyone felt hesitation. Some hypothesized that perhaps Lo Binghe was hiding his strength. But when the fight actually started, they were rendered speechless. Hiding his strength? No, this kid really wouldn't be able to beat this guy. This wasn't a match, it was a one-sided beatdown. From the moment Lo Binghe stepped forward, he essentially had no chance to strike. The demon elder's strength was incomparable, his swings filled with the vigor of a tiger. Even though Lo Binghe did his best to dodge and searched for an opening to attack, from time to time the hammer still managed to smash into him. Not only were Kangjiang Mountain's disciples dumbstruck, the demons were also at a loss for words. This was too horrible. Isn't this outcome predetermined? Someone muttered. What's the point of continuing the match? Elder Larger Hammer. Elder Skyhammer. Laughed skyward, the sound like a great bell. Well said! The child should hurry up and admit defeat. Then this elder can still spare his life. He will win, Shin Qingshou said lightly. Bullshit. Lo Binghe was the overpowered protagonist. Of course he was going to win. It was the only path to victory. It was only the path to victory that would be difficult. Shin Qingshou's voice was neither loud nor soft, but it had just enough volume to carry to the center of the match area. Lo Binghe had directly taken multiple heavy blows, and he was holding back several mouthfuls of blood. When those confident words entered his ears, he somehow managed to swallow it down. He would win? Shizun had called on him to enter because he really thought that Lo Binghe would win? The horde of demons laughed and jeered. They shouted at Lo Binghe to hurry up and admit defeat. Yet Lo Binghe did not heed their wishes. Even as he took several more blows in a row, he became more and more poised. Turning a deaf ear to the jeers and shouts from the crowd, his steps became lighter and more graceful. Soon 9 times out of 10, Elder Skyhammer's giant weapon couldn't so much as brush him. The only places on Elder Skyhammer's body that weren't covered with spikes were his face and his fists. This wasn't exactly good news. It doubtless meant that the elder had extensively trained those 2 places so they wouldn't be vulnerable, even without the protection of the poisonous spikes. At the same time, this was also very likely the only breach in his defenses. Lo Binghe slowed his breaths and attentively studied his opponent. On the surface, it had seemed that Shizun had chosen Lo Binghe only to make things difficult for him. However, if Lo Binghe had lost this round, not only would he lose face, but the entire sect would as well. And furthermore, as the one who'd chosen to put him forward, Shin Qingshou would be especially at fault. That meant that Shizun would only have chosen Lo Binghe for this match if he really did firmly believe he would win. Thus did student Lo Binghe's colorful imagination successfully activate the massive fog of misunderstanding system. What? What? His colorful imagination successfully activated the massive fog of misunderstanding system. No one had ever believed in him like this. If only because he'd been entrusted with something so vitally important, he absolutely had to win and make everyone see. What? Oh my God, what is this? Once again, that huge hammer came whistling towards him. Lo Binghe's pupils shrank, and gathering energy within his palms, he condensed his chi into an attack. The audience had been enthralled by this youth, who kept persevering without hesitation. Though Lo Binghe had no opportunities to counterattack, he never gave up looking for a chance to do so, and he furthermore refused to admit defeat. At this instant, when the chance to counterattack finally came, Lo Binghe seized with an incomparable precision. The deadlock had lasted nearly an hour, but the third match had finally come to an end. Other than Shin Qingshou, no one had anticipated this conclusion. Elder Skyhammer, who was covered from head to toe in poisonous spikes and boasted 100 years' worth of skill, had been defeated by a youth of 15 years. Sure enough, Liu Mingyan and Sha Hualing were drawn to Lo Binghe. Two pairs of beautiful eyes fixated up neatly upon him, gazing at Lo Binghe's form and unwilling to divert their attention. Captured Liu Mingyan and Sha Hualing's interests. Became famous in a fight during the battle with the demons who invaded Kangzhong Mountain Sect. Protagonist satisfaction points, plus 500. Shin Qingsho was furious. How dare you! The deduction would have been 1,000, but the profit was only 500? Black-hearted system, double standards holding dog! However, it was fine, because now everyone was thinking the same thing. Though young, Lo Binghe was truly worthy of respect. Shin Qingsho truly had inscrutable depths. Sha Hualing held herself back a long while, then finally squeezed out her concession. Kangzhong Mountain is certainly full of talent, and has produced generations of young heroes. Ling Er is indeed impressed. Well said, said Shin Qingsho. Since we have our result, could the young miss withdraw her people? Please excuse us for being such a mess right now. We're unable to continue entertaining our guests from far away. The meaning hidden in his words. Well, it wasn't hidden. This was his direct command telling them to get out. Sha Hualing was filled with anger, but there was nowhere for it to go. Her fingers clenched in the gauzy red cloth on her body for a moment. Then she suddenly exploded. She reached out and gave Elder Skyhammer a fast and violent slap. To face Senior Shin's young disciple and yet lose so badly? Her sweet voice said angrily. You've lost every bit of face for the demon race. Elder Skyhammer was also pitiable. Hierarchy within the demon realm was strict, and Sha Hualing was a saintess of noble birth. He took the slap and could only grovel. He dared not fight back, only saying again and again, your subordinate is incompetent and begs the saintess for punishment. Shin Qingsho couldn't stand watching anymore. Miss Sha, if you wish to discipline your subordinates, please do so somewhere else. Chongding Peak is not a place for the nobility to throw their weight around. With that slap, Sha Hualing had vented her anger, finally releasing some of her resentment. She turned back, full of smiles. It is as you say, Senior Shin. It was just when Ling Er saw the incredible young talent you foster, then looked at the trash under her. Her heart was filled with disappointment, so she lost control for a moment. I beg you not to laugh. She then turned, facing Elder Skyhammer with the expression of a wicked stepmother, one as cold as a refrigerator. For Elder Single Arm to lose to Senior Shin in their match was a matter of course. Yet you also lost your touch. There was no need for me to say anything. Figure out what to do yourself. As to what she meant by this, Elder Skyhammer clearly understood. His heart chilled on the spot. When they arrived, he thought that other than Shin Qingsho, the people of Zhongding Peak were a bunch of half-grown children. Disciples with shallow cultivation. I like that we're getting his perspective on this. Hence, he'd wanted to take advantage of easy pickings to earn favor before the new saintess. He never thought that he'd fail terribly, instead, to the point that he would lose his life. He looked up and saw Lo Binghe surrounded by the crowd, all asking concernedly about his well-being. Malice surged within him. He didn't dare touch Shin Qingsho, but this child who brought him so much misfortune. He absolutely had to make him take his fair share of the blame, to drag him to death as well. Shin Qingsho had been paying close attention to the demon's every movement and expression. He didn't miss the flash of nefarious intent in Elder Skyhammer's eyes. But demons were truly a bold race, taking action immediately and without even the slightest bit of buffering time. Only a second after coming up with the idea, Elder Skyhammer careened forward, swinging his weapon. Elder Skyhammer's body was large and tall, and he quickly closed the distance like a mountain of metal, hurling towards Lo Binghe. Lo Binghe's injuries weren't light, and so his movements were sluggish. He would certainly be hit. Yet Shin Qingsho let out a cold humph, and in a flash, his figure suddenly appeared in Elder Skyhammer's path. With the tip of his fan, he tapped the bend of Elder Skyhammer's knee. Elder Skyhammer collapsed on the spot! He really collapsed! His entire body crashed to the ground unconscious. As for the giant hammer, Shin Qingsho casually scooped it up and held it in his hand, weighing it. As expected, it was a tad hefty. However, given the elegant quality of his image, holding a giant hammer wasn't very aesthetic, so Shin Qingqiu immediately hurled it into the horde of demons. With a muffled thud, the head of the hammer slammed into the ground. The display was significantly shocking, and his intimidating air became even more terrifying. Shin Qingqiu's smile didn't reach his eyes. You wanted to kill him? The disciples under my tutelage are not yours to bully. When he spoke these words with awe-inspiring righteousness, not only were the demons at a loss for words, Shin Qingqiu himself felt that his inner face reddened slightly. Oh, mortal master, weren't you the one who sent your disciple out to be abused by others? Lo Binghe stared at the teal-clothed back before him, having forgotten to even say thanks. He only knew that his master had saved him yet again. Shizhen was always like this. He would always seem to be harsh on Lo Binghe, yet when it came down to the critical moment, he always stood before his student. Shin Qingqiu threw a glance behind him. Are you all right? Gonna shamelessly try to farm for some more favor points! This disciple is fine, Lo Binghe said in a rush. Oh, many thanks to Shizun for the assistance. This child is so foolishly sweet. Shin Qingqiu's inner face grew even redder, and he quickly turned back to Xia Hualing. Miss Xia, you need to properly discipline your subordinates. If you can't stand losing, why set yourself up for the potential of it with these 3 matches? Xia Hualing also hadn't predicted Elder Skyhammer's attack and was slightly embarrassed. She was just about to say a couple of perfunctory words appropriate for an apology, when in that instant something happened that no one could have predicted. Elder Skyhammer, who'd been lying motionless on the ground, suddenly leapt up and hurled himself at Lo Binghe a second time. Oh no, that's where it's gonna end! Oh, no! Oh! Well, see? MXTX is starting to get those cliffhangers. MXTX is starting to get those cliffhangers. Just a wee bit in there, but it's starting to happen. Oh. Whew, I had to chuck this jacket off. I felt like with the end of this, it was like a baby cliffhanger for MXTX. MXTX, I'm like, you can do a harder cliffhanger, which, here's the thing. I know from the Donghua what to expect for a little bit in this story, right? We're technically over a third of the way through now that we're into these chapters. We're about a third of the way through the novel, volume 1. I don't think that the events of the first 10 episodes are going to go past this volume at all. I'm hoping that we go past the Donghua in this book. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, I definitely feel like it helps to lessen the cliffhangers when you kind of know what's coming next. Because we all know what's going to happen next week. He's going to get stabbed with the poison barbs. And we're going to see where that goes. And how Liu, which we're going to talk about Liu showing up. Because he wasn't here yet in this. So there's that. But there's a couple things different from the novel than the Donghua that I want to talk about. And we'll have that moment to talk about it. But yeah, I feel like the cliffhangers are a little lessened right now because I know what's coming next. Now, once we get to the uncharted waters, Romania is going to have a little trouble then. Because then the cliffhangers are going to suck and be like, wait, no, I want to keep reading. And this story, it's so well written that you want to keep reading. Like, I literally have to stop myself and be like, no, we'll hold on. And I'm like, so it's going to be very hard. I'm going to tell y'all right now, it's going to be very hard to wait before I get to this next section. We'll see how it goes. I make no promises on whether I read ahead or not. I make no promises because it's going to be really hard because I kind of want to see what's going to happen. And I have down next week to read chapters 13 through 15. So at this point, we're going to be doing 3 chapters a week next week. And then now the following week, we're going to be doing 4. So we're going to do 3 to 4 chapters from here on in. So it's going to be fun time. I'm pretty excited. But let's talk about these chapters. We get one image I know they better damn well give us a picture of Shin like in Lo's arms next week. They better give us a picture of it. But this week we do get a pretty decent picture. We get a nice shot of Sha Hualing. I love saying her name. Of her and Ming Yan. We get a nice shot of them battling. I especially like down here. I didn't notice it at first, but you have Shin Qingqiu there. You have Lo Binghe right there. You have Ning Ying Ying and Ming Fan right there beside them as they're watching them duke it out. They don't even have a battle. We don't even get to see it. How dare you, MXTX? How dare you? Which there's a point behind why they did that, but oh, how dare they? How dare they? So we're going to start up talking about here. I'm going to move this a little wee bit closer, Whiteboard Coon. And we're going to put Whiteboard Coon a little bit closer. We're going to start out with our B points up here at the top. And we started out with 495. We're doing pretty darn well at the start of this here. I did want to bring up, you probably heard like a little beeping sound. I did want to bring up the Discord to note at that moment what the chapter titles for this week were, which were chapters 10 through 12. Chapter 10 was called The Demon's Provocation, which was the Saintess. I kept wanting to call her Saintress, but it's Saintess of Sha's provoking of Shin Qingqiu, even though Shin's like, I know how this song and dance goes. Chapter 11 was Screwing Over the Male Lead Part 2. Which doesn't end up happening that way. We'll talk about it. And then chapter 12 is Building a Good Impression. Yes, that is exactly what ends up happening. So we need to talk about this. So let's go throughout this little section here and talk about it, shall we? Chapter 10. Even though the person he'd worked so hard to save was discussed with him. Yeah, what's interesting enough is that Liu Qingge kind of just disappears from the story at this point, which he did in the Donghua as well. I had been really hoping that we would see more of him right off the bat, but that's not really the case. And then Shin kind of just trains up a little bit. I like that Shin phrases him using Liu Qingge as an idea as someone that's going to help him later on. As we talked about last week, we found out that Ming Yan is his sister, and his death in the original novel spurns her to like join the harem, because that was knowing her character and how she is, which we're going to talk about that. I'm fascinated, but talking about her character and how stoic she is and noble, her joining Lo Binghe's harem at first was like, well, why would she have even done that? Well, it was because to get revenge on her brother's death, but now that's not a thing that's going to happen. So because her character is so pure, there's a very strong possibility she doesn't join his harem at all. So I mean, we'll talk about Sha Hualing when we get to her, but I think there's a very strong chance that Ming Yan doesn't join him at all, or his harem, and she's just kind of like does her own thing, which that would be really interesting if, because Lo Binghe has an attraction towards Shin Qingqiu instead of all of these harem girls, if it forces the female characters in the story to actually go out and have their own storylines. Like Ning Ying Ying, instead of like crouching at Lo Binghe's feet every 5 seconds, Shin shoos her away and she has to go have her own storyline. Maybe she ends up with Ming Fan. I'm totally for that. But the idea that Liu Mingyan maybe ends up having her own storyline. Because in the Donghua, it seemed like she was kind of off doing her own thing in the desert. And I'm like, is she going to end up with like Gongji and they're going to get together instead? And that's going to be like the twist of how the story changes. That part could be really interesting. Now, Sha Hualing, I think based on these chapters, does have an affinity for Lo Binghe, but she might just end up being this temptress, and Lo's like, no, I'm into dicks. Like shoves her away. And she's like, oh, well, okay. And she just becomes his beard. So we'll see if that happens. I like the idea of stoic Lo Binghe being like, I like dicks, and shoving people away, shoving the harem girls away. We'll see how that goes. But I also like the idea that Shin was planning on using Liu as a shield or as an ally. The fact that he's very similar to Lo Binghe makes me think that maybe Lo could become jealous of Liu. I don't know. Liu was supposed to die originally, so everything that happens with Liu from this point on is not scripted, not planned by the novel, and the reactions he could get from other characters, such as Lo Binghe, especially as he grows an attachment and affinity to Shin Chingcho, is all in the realm of possibility, right? Crazy talk. Crazy talk. So he talks about raising up his level. I love Shin Chingcho's otaku-ness. I love how excited he gets. And not necessarily excited to see the female characters fight because it's like, oh, it's like a girl versus girl, like a cat fight. No, it's not like that. It's that he's just this nerd and they're really badass characters. And he's like, I've wanted to see them fight. And he probably thought since they don't get to show the fights in the novel that he'd get to see it here. But he's too busy worrying about Lo and being attracted to him that he's not noticing it. And it's like, Shin. But yeah, I love how much of a geek he is and how he kind of nerds out. And I like the fact that MXTX kind of talks about that nerdiness in her writing. And even like the way his character's written, some of his dialogue just has that little air of kind of like you're just giddy and nerdy about stuff and you're geeking out about it. And that's really fun. I like reading about Shin when he has those moments, right? Now, in the Donghua, unless I'm mistaken, in the Donghua, I thought that he gets down off the mountain. There's like demons invading the forest. He comes in and him and Lo Binghe have a moment where they look at each other and they're like, hey, you've gotten a little bit taller. Hey, you're hot and I've learned things, Shidi. And like all this stuff. That doesn't happen here. Instead, Shin Chingcho goes straight to where all the demons are gathering for the competition. And that makes sense because he already knows what's going to happen from the novel. He already has the plot figured out up until this point, or so he thinks. So it makes sense that he would just cut straight to the chase. But I did like in the Donghua that we got that little moment of them meeting up after he's been in the cave for years, supposedly. I'm glad we get that little moment of them reconnecting, right? I thought that was really well done. So yeah, interesting. My dog's like under my feet doing something weird. So yeah. So if we calculated the time and date, it's one of the first early climaxes of the early narrative. So in the OG story, this battle is pretty important in that it's like one of the mini climaxes. One could say the mini climax of the first arc, where we've met our characters. Seems legit. Seems to make sense. But yeah, he's like, he arrives at just the right moment where everybody's like, I like that they all ask like, where is our dare officer? Where are they at? They're conveniently out of the plot at this point, which again, knowing that this is a novel and knowing that it's kind of like not the best written novel, and that's what Shin Chingcho is trying to change, it seems all too convenient that your leaders, dare officer Qingyan and then Liu Qingge, are like, they basically are off just conveniently where Sha Hualing can come in. These names, I tell you, they are literal tongue twisters. It's like MXTX is doing this on purpose, and I kind of despise her for it. Respect, but internally despise. I feel like this, someone commented about this, it makes you feel like Shin Chingcho being like, what are you doing, MXTX? Why are you doing this? Except MXTX is doing it under the great master airplane in the sky, under their pseudonym. It makes you just as frustrated, right? But I even like that they called him Disciple A and Disciple B. That part was ridiculous. So, in any case, I like that we now have everybody gathered for Sha Hualing to show up with her demons. So, Shin says it'd been some time since he'd last seen the boy, and he'd grown taller by a fair amount. And every time Shin Chingcho describes Liu Binghe, it's like he's just describing a painting, like a literal oil painting. He's like his youthful figure, like a graceful, elongating stalk of bamboo, along with a handsome little face. He drew a great deal of attention. Even when he's describing Sha Hualing, who is supposedly the most popular female character in the entire story, he does not describe her with the sensuality that he describes Lo Binghe. Does not. I will argue you he does not. But yes, then this young girl of no more than 15 or 16. I like that she's young, like Lo Binghe. So as he grows up, she's going to grow up too. And so they're going to be both adults, I'm assuming, by later on in the story, which is interesting. I like that. And the same with Liu Mingfan. or Mignon, same with them. But yeah, I like the way that she's described. She's described exactly like she is in the Donghua, which is really exciting. And the fact that they're like, she's young, but that it's evident she's going to grow into this beautiful, beautiful saintess, right? And then the moment they described her wrists and ankles decorated with the silver bangles and the tiny bells that jingled, and her name is Xia Hualing, this isn't much of a spoiler because you find out like within the first episode of Heaven Official's Blessing, but the way they describe her, the way that she incorporates the pitch black hair, the fair skin, the red garments, the silver bells, she's literally like a young, arrogant female Hua Chong, basically, but just more arrogant and kind of aggravating. So I can definitely see the influence that MXTX had with Hua Chong being like, oh yeah, I really like Xia Hualing. I liked her design. I really liked everything about her. What if I made her a man? And made her the protagonist or one of the main characters of my third story. Why not? Why not? So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. But my favorite thing about this, though, is I'm sorry, like I said in the reaction, if there is any telltale sign that Shin Ching-cho is not heterosexual, it's the fact that this gorgeous woman that's scantily clad is walking towards him, and the one thing that stands out is the fact that she's not wearing proper footwear. I'm sorry, but ladies, if you run into a man that happens to note the first thing about you is that your feet look uncomfortable, first of all, befriend them for life. But second of all, unless they are bisexual, you're probably not going to date them. So I'm just gonna point that out there. But yeah, be best friends with them because they're probably an amazing person. I'd be all about it. I'd be like, yes, please help me gain better footwear. I'm all for this, Shin Ching-cho. I feel like me and Shin Ching-cho is my type of guy, in terms of being a friend, that I would totally be besties with them. I'm like, their peacock personality is something that I'm like a moth to a flame, because I just want to sit there and hover around them and be like, yes, keep talking. So yeah, Xia Hualing, a pure-blooded demon. I like the idea they talk about nobility and the fact that she's pure-blooded. So she like has, we talk about bloodlines. So the fact with her, we're going to put her SH here, being this pure-blooded demon, I think is relatively important to bring up, because we established that Lo Binghe has some like noble blood himself. So I'm sure that could be a plot point that gets addressed later on. But what I think is most interesting about this is talking about the trope of the brainless, lovesick girl, and there was nothing you could do. There is a female character in Heaven Official's Blessing who kind of falls into the same trope that Xia Hualing does, in the fact that she's someone that would kill and betray others for someone she loves. There is a character in Heaven Official's Blessing like that, who is portrayed very much as the antagonist. So I think that's interesting. And I like the idea that MXTX is kind of critiquing it, being like, these days, a good number of people don't like this trope, but an even larger number of male readers love it. I just love that MXTX is taking the time to just slowly give her feminist critique of the male gaze and patriarchal tropes in romance novels. I'm like, yes, MXTX, speak your truth, girl. Let's go. Because she really is. She's just like, yeah, it's kind of a trope that everybody knows is bad, but a lot of people like it, so it keeps on showing up. The idea that this pitiful girl, that she could be this spicy and only be enjoyed by the male lead. Mm-hmm. And then during all this time, as he's talking about what an amazing character she is, he keeps staring over to Lo, and Lo keeps staring at him, being like, are you into me? I'm glad that we get the perspective of Lo in this moment, to kind of be like, to kind of know where Lo's thought process is. Shin keeps looking over at him, being like, you poor soul, you're gonna have these girls in your harem. Meanwhile, Lo is sitting there being like, is he hitting on me? Like, just the waves could not be more crisscrossed and more not matching at all. But yes. And so Shin just nods. I like that Shin does like the most heterosexual, like, yeah, like nod to him. Who are you fooling? Who are you fooling? So the Rainbow Bridge, which is in no way a connotation for anything, has been severed and they can't get to anybody to get help from any direction, which is going to be interesting to note, like, because when we ended this chapter set, we know that Shin Chingcho is about to get pierced by the poison barbs, but I feel like in the Donghua, by this point, Liu and the other, what's his name, Qingyang, they've already shown back up. Or maybe I'm wrong and they show up right as he gets stabbed. Maybe? We'll have to wait next week and find out. But I feel like in the Donghua they were already here, like at the end of the match they show up, but I feel like it was much more. The Donghua had a hard task with this scene because MXTX is making fun of the fact that they gathered here for this giant battle and there's not really a giant battle. It's just, it's over. It's like one and done. It's just like one after the other. MXTX is like, instead of writing these battle scenes, I'm going to write about these two men oogling each other and having these deep, like, interpersonal, like, thoughts about how they relate to one another and what they mean to each other. Like, MXTX was not out here to write a battle scene. That's not what she's doing. Instead, she's setting the stage with the characters and what they potentially could do later on. So I feel like the Donghua had a harder row to hoe because they had to take this scene in the book that doesn't really have a lot of information surrounding it, and they had to create a battle scene out of it. It's like, oh. So that's why the big battle with Lo versus Skyhammer at the end is a lot more epic in the Donghua, because it's like actually showing what Lo is doing, actually showing him reminiscing and kind of trying to piece together Shin Chingcho's like words to him, and then having the reaction and having the conclusion to the battle. Like that all, the Donghua team, I give them praise for making, they made a mountain out of a molehill, basically. They make lemonade out of lemons is what they did with that, and I thought it was really well done in the Donghua. So yeah, everybody's all gathered around, and then the demons tried to break through, and Xia Hualing, clever and resourceful. But she knew that the strongest people in the sect were gone, and that's when she took advantage to try and, get in there and spar, or basically wreck the place. I love that Shin just flaps his fan and is just having this fun in the moment, being like, oh, really? Because Shin, when Shin is confident, when Shin Chingcho is confident, he is confident, and he thinks he knows exactly what's going to go down, which is going to make the next chapter set next week, I think, really, really fun, right? So also, I thought, to me, in the Donghua, it almost made it seem like Xia was kind of flirting with Shin Chingcho in this moment, like she was trying to get on his good side and flirt with him. In the novel, she very much is just like mocking him, and she's really just into Lo Binghe, and that's it, which is interesting, right? And so I like that Shin calls her young miss. He sounds like Doctor Who. He sounds like a little grandpa when he calls them all, well, young missy, what are you doing? Like, there's a character in a show I'm watching called Psycho-Pass that calls people Missy, and he's an older man, probably like in his 50s, and he calls people Missy, and it makes him seem like a middle-aged man. Whenever Shin Chingcho calls Xia Hualing like young miss, I'm like, aren't you like 24? Why are you calling her young miss? I mean, Shin Yan, not Shin Chingcho, but Shin Yan's like, what, in his 20s in real life? Like, him calling her young miss. He's like trying to be Shin Chingcho in the moment as a character, but also it's just hilarious that he's saying that. Just really funny. So, okay, the three representatives of how it goes down and how the matches go versus what ends up happening. So, in the OG, we had Shin Chingcho versus the Elder Single Arm. The only difference was the battle was very dirty. It was very underhanded. It was very dirty, which matched Shin Chingcho's personality at the beginning. And the whole point of it was to create this contrast to Lo. So you saw how Shin won the battle very underhandedly, and then it's going to make Lo look even more honorable and upright. Makes sense. And then I forgot that Ming Yan was versus, I forgot it was like the lady battle in the middle. That one I forgot. And that one pretty much stays the same. And then we have Lo Binghe versus the Elder Skyhammer. And in that one, Lo manages to get a even better appreciation for for Shin. Whereas in the original, I think the Donghua made it known in the original, Lo gets really upset because he realized that Shin threw him under the bus, and it's kind of like an underdog battle, and Lo winning is like him fighting his way back, from the bottom, and he uses his hatred and anger to fuel his victory. Whereas here, instead of hatred and anger fueling his victory against Shin Chingcho, it's love. And the fact that Lo realizes that Shin believes in him and has faith in him, and it's that different motivation he has that still allows him to attain the same results. Whether or not Shin Chingcho realizes the ultimate, realizes the power of this change, I do not know. So yeah, and he's like, I won't use a single hand. Again, they don't really talk a whole lot about how the battle actually goes. He talks about just bouncing around the single arm, and like the fact that he just basically danced and sparks sprayed and everything, and the crowd couldn't tear their eyes away. I like the idea of it being captivating, and instead of being like underhanded and dirty, he was like using this time to show off his cultivation skills and here's the thing, he had trained in the cave. The cave training had benefited him in that moment. So whereas the original Shin Chingcho wasn't probably as strong as this one was. So that makes a big difference too. But I mean, basically this whole chapter set, Lo Binghe and Shin Chingcho have heart eyes for each other, and they're just oblivious and don't realize it. And you're just sitting there going, oh. Meanwhile, the dare officer and Leo Chinge are just in the base of the sect, like eating popcorn going, can you believe this? But yes, so strong. I do love the idea of Lo looking at Shin Chingcho and being like, he was this incredible, this strong. If MXTX likes to do one thing, it's make her pair of men appreciate each other and put each other on equal playing fields. Because that's kind of the thing. That's sort of one of the reasons why I love Danmai and I love BL, is because in a lot of heteronormative romance novels, the lady is not on equal terms with the man. It's very patriarchal, and the male character is like, even if he doesn't save her, there's always that air of him being dominant, or him being like the superior one, or the one to make her life better and all this. And that's in so many romance novels, and it's just so, it's either that or it's the fix-it novel where the girl has to like take this loser and make him presentable, and you're like, girl, why? So I've always been drawn to BL and Danmai since I started this channel, because a lot of these relationships are about the two characters just respecting one another and being equally powerful in their own way, not necessarily in the same way, but in their own way, being equal to one another and being able to stand toe to toe with one another. And that is so great that I love it. And MXTX does such a good job with it, and her two leads. So we're starting to see that dynamic sort of develop between Shin and Lo Binghe, and it's really, really exciting. So he ends up winning, and then I like that we get our B points added onto here. And so Shin makes the assertion that he's like, oh, so a scum villain can also attain reputation points, because that's part of the goal, is to, I'm looking over to Conspiracy Board Sama, to raise the IQ of the villain and sporting characters, to raise their popularity and reputation. So we had 50 points added from the first match. Martial skill rating plus 50, so B points plus 50. So we had those added on too. But at this point, the system, I like that, unlike the Donghua, in the Donghua, it makes Shin Chingcho be kind of a little bit more devious and a little bit more sneaky, where he's like, well, I'll just battle all of them. And the system's like, nah. Here, they don't even give us time to have Shin Chingcho even have that kind of thought. They immediately say, Lo has to participate, or you're going to lose all your B points and die. And he's like, I love when Shin's like, bitch, are you for real? Are you trying to get everybody killed? Also, he is very appropriate and right in being upset that you lose 1,000 but only gain 500. Not fair, but the system's like, saith the system, what do we do? And my dogs are just going to play with each other and chase each other, so we'll have to ignore them. But yeah, so this competition is an important part of the plot. But it debuts the two female leads, pits their splendor against one another, and the consequences of it later enable the protagonist to get an underling and allow him to learn secret techniques. All important things. So the question at this point would be to learn secret techniques and gain an underling. I'm assuming that Xia Hualing is the underling that's going to be part of the harem, because she ends up betraying her demon clan to do that. It even said she like stabbed her dad in the back to like end up with Lo. So interesting. And we find out, I love when Shin calls the original Shin Ching-cho the original flavor. I like that. And he says that the original flavor pushed him onto the battlefield because he was shameless. He didn't care about the sex reputation. He just hated Lo Binghe and wanted to torture him. And here, Shin is doing it not necessarily to, because he doesn't care about the reputation, but because he knows that Lo is going to win, and he's trying to use this as a moment to like build him up instead, which has consequences, right? The current Shin Ching-cho didn't share any of those three motives. I love it, right? So I like though he does say, he's like, the end of everything, why am I responsible for the oh so mighty protagonist satisfaction points? Why am I responsible? I love that he calls the system very unscientific, and I'm like, Shin, you don't get it. You and Lo Binghe are going to end up together, so you have to support each other. You are responsible for his satisfaction points because you are going to be the main source of his satisfaction. So, what do we do? So then we have where Xia Hualing says they can't all use the same person for all three matches. And so then he's like, is anybody willing to come forward? And that's when Liu Mingyan comes through. I think it's very important that at this point we know that Liu Mingyan is Chingay's sister. I think it's important to know that for a couple reasons. One, because it explains her stoicness to a T. It's freaking genetic. They are genetically stoic. The two of them are genetically stoic to a fault. It is all explained, makes sense. But also, like, her being this ethereal beauty, I could see maybe Liu Chingay being protective of her. So maybe that will lead him and Lo Binghe to have a conflict because he's trying to protect her and he doesn't want her to be part of the harem. However that goes, maybe that won't need to be a problem because there is no harem. So we'll just see where that goes. But I could definitely see a lot of possibilities with Chingay and Mingyan being siblings, that opens up a large possibility for them to interact with one another, as well as Shin Ching-cho and Lo Binghe. I feel like they're going to be like a big portion of this story with them interacting together. I also love the phrase, she was a crane among chickens. It's such a phrase. I love that. I love a crane among chickens. And then there's this idea that she could steal souls. She has to hide behind a veil because her beauty is capable of stealing souls. I feel like part of that's a euphemism. It's just a symbolic, like, oh, she's as bright as the sun. It's just a metaphor. But then another part of me is like, we're in a fantasy Danmai. Is it a metaphor, or is that something she literally could do later on in the story? I'm leaning towards the former, but I'm going to be open to if we have the latter happen. I won't be surprised. I'll be like, oh yeah, I remember when the book told us that. So yeah. And then every possible description that Master Airplane Shooting Towards the Sky could say about her, from elementary school to high school. Basically, I like the Shin Ching-cho basically says that Master Airplane Shooting Towards the Sky is not a very good writer and used all their vocabulary to describe her. But here's my thing. And Shin Ching-cho, being a feminist icon that he is, says he was really fond of her, not because she was the most pretty, not because she had great poise, but she was the only female character that didn't have detailed sex scenes. I hadn't even taken that into consideration. I was like, in this stallion male fantasy novel, when they said that Lo Binghe had his harem of hundreds of women and they had all their grandchildren, I was like, I just thought it was like the end of an anime where after your protagonist has battled all the monsters, you cut to like 10 years later and he has the anime dad haircut, and then there's the wife, and then they have two kids that look exactly like them. I thought that that's where it was going. I had not taken into account the idea that in this giant million chapter story, there were like heterosexual sex scenes. Did not take that into account. Is it weird that I was instantly off put by that? Is it weird that I was like, oh, ew. I was like, I don't want to read about Lo Binghe and Ning Ying getting it on. Ew, no. I was like instantly like, oh no. Well, good for her. Good for Ming-Yan not having to be in a sex scene. And then I like that we have the little illustration of Airplane Towards the Sky where it's like, can't be helped. The unobtainable ones are always the best. And I'm like, they are awful. Yeah. An image as clear as ice and pure as jade. Interesting. So, we have this idea now in the OG that we have sex scenes, but it's within the harem and Lo. I can't imagine how that could change later on. I can't imagine how that's going to change later on in the story. Are we still going to have those sex scenes? Or are they going to be different sex scenes? Come on, MXTX. What do you got for us? We're going to have to wait so long for that. That's the only bad thing about an MXTX story. You got to wait forever till you get to the juicy, spicy stuff. They're like, here's the thing. In Modao Zushi and Heaven Official's Blessing, you do have to wait for stuff to happen. It is a slow burn. MXTX can write a slow burn like nobody else. And you got to wait some time. But I feel like these two, like at this point in the story, we've at least had Wei Wuxian being like, yeah, I do Lan Wangji. Like at least like casually mentioning it. And at this point, like Hua Chong has already like laid down an empire to be like, my God, to like him, you know, and you kind of see the writing on the wall. With these two, they're so oblivious to each other that I'm like, are we even going to make it to that point in this story? I don't know how we're going to do that. And that's probably what I'm most excited about, is seeing how MXTX gets us to that point. Because the Donghua, we don't get that far, which is very frustrating, right? Very frustrating indeed. So yeah, so then we have the idea that Shin Qingshou talks about with the idea of being caught between the angel and the devil and watching them jealously vie with each other to risk life and limb for his sake. Basically, every perverted fantasy of every male organism. And the fact that Shin Qingshou calls it perverted and feels like it's wrong is, again, another sign that he's not on board with it. Maybe not on board with women either, so... But he doesn't seem to notice. It's like, you're not really, not very self-aware when it comes to that. And then we get Lo wondering if Shin Qingshou is interested in him, which I feel like those two things coinciding at the same time is not coincidence. MXTX is setting us up to know that. It's a pity that under Great Master Airplane Shooting Towards the Sky's pin, battles between female characters usually lacked any standout moments other than ripping something for the male gaze. I wanted to go back to that point. Did they say anything specifically about what that was? What that ripping was? Something for the male gaze? What is it saying here? Because they have that battle between them. Didn't write the detailed sex scene. Something... I feel like this is going to be the exact same as the book. That's something about... Yeah, other than ripping for the male gaze. I don't know what... Y'all, it's probably going to be very obvious when you all tell me, but I'm going to need you in the comments to tell me, ripping blank under the male gaze, or for the male gaze, what does that mean? What's the word that's getting bleeped out? Is it... other than ripping... What are they ripping for the male gaze? Like their uniforms? Their outfits? Is it a word I'm not supposed to know? Just, what is it supposed to be? I feel like once y'all tell me, I'm going to be like, oh. But we'll see what y'all say about that one. But yes, none of the battles have any memorable moments. And I think that's one of the things, too, that he's going to be trying to change in all of this, is the battles having memorable moments. It doesn't really happen with the battle between Hua Xiaoling or Sha Hualing and Ming-Yan, but the memorable moment from this battle is going to be Shin Chingcho getting pierced by the poison barbs. That's the memorable moment. So I like the idea that he's being tasked with creating memorable moments out of the battles that are yet to come. We'll see. But yeah, the battle's over just like that. And then we have the Sky Hammer. And I love that Shin Chingcho just rips Great Master Airplane shooting towards the sky apart, being like, this is really what you call of these bad guys? Are you serious? And so they actually come out and say that the barbs are poison. I don't remember if they do so in the Donghua or not. In the Donghua, it felt like it was an afterthought that after he gets stabbed, they're like, oh, by the way, there's a deadly poison in that you can't stop and you're going to die. And it's like, oh no. But here they come out and tell you right off the bat. So I think it works either way. It either creates the tension from the moment that it starts, or it's like a shock later that you find out like, oh shit. So, I do like that Shin Chingcho rubs the crease between his brows. It's like the first time we've had a character do it in this story. And I'm like, yes, a classic MXTX trope hath appeared, which is great. So then we talked about this in the Donghua, that Shin realizes that Xia Hualing is not the same that he pictured. She is the same type of character that he knew from the novel, but whereas in a fictional story that character comes off as cool, in real life you're like, God, they're annoying. No. So, which I think is very true. There's lots of things in fiction that I think is cool. Like when characters smoke in fiction, I think it's the coolest thing. In real life, it's disgusting and I can't stand it. So, case in point. So then we have the last chapter where Lo is chosen, and he seems a little bit unsure of what to do. And Shin Chingcho tries to be very dramatic and serious in this moment with his fan, being like, let's go. You've got to uphold the sex honor. And poor Ning Ying Ying, she like gets very upset and just is like, no. And then she runs off. I love that Shin, he's just like, yes, she's going to be off the battlefield and she's not going to be in the way. He's affecting the story and doesn't realize it, because he's made a point of saying that she often gets in the way and extends the story where it doesn't need to be extended. And here, because Shin was like, nope, we're going to do it. This is how it's going to be. And Lo was like, no, it's all right. You can go. Because he doesn't have that same relationship with her as he did in the OG novel. Her running away and running off, he's like, good, run. If she ran, then trouble she was supposed to make after this drama wouldn't crop up. So apparently with Ning Ying Ying, there's supposed to be drama afterwards that now is not happening. So in the original, Shin basically throws Lo to the wolves and says, go on, kill yourself, ha ha ha, and he ends up winning anyway. So I'm sure in the original, Shin was upset, and Shin Chingcho was like, well, how could he have done this? Well, why is my plans for curses foiled again? And then Ying Ying shows up, and she's like, my hero, and that makes Ming Fan even more pissed off, and then it just, cycles the violence and everything against Lo even more. But here, Lo's the one that gets saved by Shin, so Ying Ying doesn't have that opportunity to do that. The story is changing, and we don't know where it's going. We don't know there's like been dozens of butterfly effects at this point, and we have no clue what the ramifications of that is going to be. And we're just sitting here like, this story is not the same that it was when it started. And I don't think Shin fully realizes that yet. I don't think he fully realizes it until Wanrong dies. And we've got a ways to go before we get to that. So, oh my gosh. But yeah, he's like, this kid really wouldn't have been able to beat him. But because Lo was the protagonist, And the thing of it is that Shin, without realizing it, he said the words, he will win. And he was just saying them to himself, kind of being like, yeah, duh, he's going to win. But Lo heard him. Shin Chingcho is not aware of everything that Lo is able to hear. And Lo heard him, and that was the motivation he needed to beat him. It's been little things. So far, it's been in the carriage ride, the little smile and the little gestures. It's been the little words, like all of these tiny little kind gestures and uplifting, motivating gestures that we so often take for granted and don't think about are the things that are motivating Lo to become a better person and to become a stronger person. And Shin Chingcho doesn't realize it. And it's like, oh my God. So it's mind blowing. Mind blowing. So yeah. And Lo ends up, okay, so this one thing. He's like, Shizun would only have chosen Lo Binghe for this match if he really did firmly believe that he would win. And thus, student Lo Binghe's colorful imagination successfully activate the massive fog of misunderstanding system. I'm sorry, what? So we're going to put this down here with a big old question mark. The massive fog of misunderstandings system. Oh my God, the alliteration, y'all. Massive fog of misunderstanding system. We have the scum villain self-saving system and the massive fog of misunderstanding system. Oh my God, no, they're cropping up everywhere. Nope, too many. So basically, whereas Shin's system is designed to save him from dying, to save him from dying, I'm assuming this massive fog of misunderstanding system is to lead Lo to love Shin more. But here's the problem. Massive fog of misunderstanding can go both ways. It could either, in a sense, be a way for him to misunderstand what Shin Chingcho is doing and thinking that it's out of kindness. But I feel like if Nightmare figures out about this system, or if something doesn't work right in it, then maybe it could lead to Lo Binghe misunderstanding something about Shin Chingcho when he's trying to do good. I feel like it could go two ways. And the thing of it is, I almost want to see like a little system pop up with Lo to talk to him. And we don't get that. So I don't understand what we're going to do with that. That's massive fog of misunderstanding system terrifies me. It could either be really, really good for Shin Chingcho and the plot, or it could lead to something horrific. I don't know if I like where this is headed, but we'll just have to see. But no one had believed in him like this. He had to win to make everyone see. And it does work! He manages to beat him, and the protagonist's satisfaction points go up 500. Cool. The one thing was, at the very beginning in the story, Shin Chingcho talked about being in like the 300s, and I was like, no, we started at 495. So I don't know if we got down to 300. I think maybe he just didn't understand how many points he had, and he was just estimating. So we're just going to keep it at 495 right now until the system tells us otherwise. So right now we have 5. Oh, that's 4 plus 50. I need to put this over a little bit better. There we go. So we have 5, we have 14, and then we have 1,045. Look at me being able to do simple math. I ain't touched a calculator in 15 years. So yeah, so he's up to 1,045 points. We're doing pretty damn good. We're doing good. Although the one thing he could have just done would have cost him 1,000 points. So not so good. But yes, 500 points. So we're up to 1,045. And damn, Shin Chingcho was like, I demand more. And the system was not about to give it to him. So he's like, yes. Could the young miss withdraw her people? I like that Shin's basically like, get the hell out of here. And then, yeah. So Xia Hualing, she basically tells the elder man to go kill himself because he couldn't do the job properly. And so he gets pissed off, lunges at Lo, and then Lo and Shin Shin manages to stop him from attacking Lo, and then we think that the battle is over, right? And he's like, the disciples under my tutelage are not yours to bully, which is such a different statement than what would have been said by the original Shin Chingcho. Because he's like, weren't you the one who sent your disciple out to be abused by others? And that's the thing. He's like, oh, I say all these things, but originally my character was so awful to Lo Binghe. So he's like, it's like, what am I doing? And then Lo could only stare at the back before him. He forgot to even say thanks. He only knew that his master had saved him yet again. So it seems that while I like the idea of Shin's face getting redder and redder inside, where he's like so embarrassed. He's like, why am I saying these things? Oh my God, this is embarrassing. So on the one hand, you have Shin, who is still embarrassed by what the original flavor has done. And then you have Lo, who feels that he needs to be able to protect Shin Qingshou. He's like, he's protected me all this time and I can't protect him yet. I need to fix that. It's like, okay. And so, yeah, that's at that moment when the Elder Skyhammer, who is motionless on the ground, suddenly hurls himself at Lo Binghe a second time. I also like Shin being like, I like Shin glances behind at Lo being like, are you all right? He's like, I gotta try to farm some more favor points. And then he's like, oh, this child is so foolishly sweet. But his face grows even redder. I'm like, oh. The obliviousness of these two is just, it's something else, y'all. It's on another level. I don't know how else to describe it. So yeah, we all know what's going to happen next week, although we don't know where Liu Qingge is, or our Dare officer, where they've shown up at yet. Next week, I'm going to be looking at chapters 13 through 15, which is in the book pages 123 to 152. So it's going to be a little bit longer, like I said, which I talked for nearly an hour about these chapters, and I didn't know if I was going to talk that long about them at all. So here we go. Like I said, I do love what MXTX is doing in talking about how normally female characters are portrayed in a harem novel, and that they're just superfluously there just to make the protagonist look great and for sex scenes. And I like the idea that MXTX is possibly setting up that she's going to have not only let these female characters have different storylines, but also that they're going to be able to interact with the characters in unique and perhaps challenged ways, which is exciting. So I can't wait. I'm so excited. I'm going to try to wait for comments, but I make no guarantees. So I'll probably check in and see if there's any feral fandom business to report to you all from the Discord. But I'm super excited to hear your thoughts down below about these chapters. So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. Sorry to make you wait, but I'll be back really soon with more Scum Villains Self-Saving System. Bye!